Nobody expected what happened that Sunday morning. The church was packed with hundreds of worshippers. Soft music filled the air as people raised their hands in prayer. At the front of the church stood Pastor Daniel, a man admired by everyone. People traveled from different cities just to attend his services because they believed miracles happened wherever he prayed. That morning, Pastor Daniel called a successful businesswoman named Grace to the altar. "My daughter," he said with a warm smile, "today, God is going to remove every burden from your life." The congregation erupted in applause. Grace walked forward, nervous but hopeful. She had heard countless stories of people who claimed their lives changed after Pastor Daniel prayed for them. She believed this would be her moment too. Pastor Daniel gently placed one hand on her forehead and closed his eyes. The church became completely silent. Then, Grace saw something no one else could see. For a split second, a terrifying dark figure burst from Pastor Daniel's hand, reaching toward her face with long shadowy fingers. Its glowing eyes locked onto hers. Grace screamed. She stumbled backward and fell to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. The entire church froze. People rushed toward her. But when they looked at Pastor Daniel, he was standing peacefully with his Bible still in his hand. "There is nothing to fear," he said calmly. "The enemy has been exposed." The congregation immediately began praying louder. Some blamed Grace. Others whispered that she must be possessed. Grace kept pointing at Pastor Daniel, tears streaming down her face. "No," she cried. "It came from him. I saw it." Nobody believed her. Except one person. A young woman sitting quietly near the back of the church. Her name was Esther. And from that moment, her life would never be the same. When the service ended, Grace rushed out of the church without speaking to anyone. Several members watched her leave, shaking their heads. "She needs serious prayers," one woman whispered. "No," another replied. "She came with an evil spirit." Pastor Daniel simply smiled and told everyone not to judge her. "The devil attacks those who are close to receiving great blessings," he said. The congregation nodded in agreement. Only Esther remained silent. She couldn't forget the fear she had seen in Grace's eyes. It wasn't the fear of someone pretending. It was the fear of someone who had witnessed something terrifying. The following Sunday, Grace never returned. Weeks passed, and nobody mentioned her name again. It was as if she had never existed. Esther decided to stay in the church a little longer. She joined the volunteer team and began helping after every service. She wanted to understand why everyone trusted Pastor Daniel without question. At first, everything seemed normal. Pastor Daniel preached powerful messages. People cried during worship. Families shared testimonies of miracles and breakthroughs. But little by little, Esther noticed things that didn't make sense. The richest members of the church were always invited into Pastor Daniel's private office after service. The poor were politely turned away and asked to come back another day. Late every Friday night, expensive black SUVs quietly drove into the church compound long after everyone had gone home. Nobody ever spoke about those meetings. One evening, while cleaning the church hallway, Esther accidentally walked toward a door marked private. Before she could touch the handle, a quiet voice stopped her. "You shouldn't be here." She turned around. Standing behind her was the church accountant. His name was William. His expression wasn't angry. It was worried. "I've seen that look before," William said softly. The same look Grace had. Esther stared at him. "What happened to her?" William looked down the empty hallway before answering. "Forget what you saw. For your own safety." He walked away without another word. Esther stood frozen. For the first time, she realized Grace might have been telling the truth. That night, Esther couldn't sleep. William's warning kept replaying in her mind. "Forget what you saw, for your own safety." The next morning, she returned to the church earlier than usual. She pretended to be arranging chairs, but her eyes were searching every corner of the building. As she walked past Pastor Daniel's office, she noticed the door was slightly open. Inside, Pastor Daniel was speaking with two wealthy businessmen. "I don't want promises," he said calmly. "I want commitment. If you trust me, your lives will never remain the same." One of the men placed a thick envelope on the desk. Pastor Daniel smiled. Esther quickly stepped away before anyone noticed her. That afternoon, she found William organizing financial records in a small office. "I know you're hiding something," Esther said quietly. William stopped writing but didn't look up. "You should leave this church while you still can." "I'm not leaving until I know the truth." For a long moment, William said nothing. Then he locked the office door. He walked to a metal cabinet, pulled out an old folder, and placed it on the table. Inside were copies of bank transfers, fake medical reports, and printed testimonies that had been prepared before church services even took place. Esther's heart began racing. "These miracles," she whispered. "They were planned." William nodded. Some people were paid to pretend they had been healed. Others were promised money if they gave convincing testimonies. Esther could hardly believe what she was hearing. But why? William closed his eyes. Because people believe what they want to believe. He took a deep breath before continuing. "My younger brother trusted Pastor Daniel with everything he had. He sold his business, emptied his savings, and donated it all because the pastor told him God would multiply it." William's voice began to shake. "When nothing happened, my brother couldn't bear the shame. He took his own life." Silence filled the room. Esther's eyes filled with tears. For years, William had quietly collected evidence. He had been waiting for someone brave enough to help expose the truth. Looking directly at Esther, he said, "If we do this, there's no turning back." Esther nodded without hesitation. "I'm ready." Over the next few days, Esther and William worked in secret. Whenever the church was empty, William quietly copied financial records while Esther photographed every document she could find. The evidence kept growing. There were fake healing certificates, forged testimonies, secret donation records, and lists of wealthy members who had been pressured into giving away huge amounts of money. One Friday night, William received a message. "He's coming." Pastor Daniel had arrived unexpectedly. The two quickly hid inside a storage room beside the church office. Through a small crack in the door, Esther watched as Pastor Daniel entered with 3 wealthy visitors. One by one, they handed him large black bags filled with cash. Pastor Daniel smiled. "Your sacrifice will open doors that no one can shut," he said. The visitors thanked him and left. A few minutes later, Pastor Daniel locked the office and walked away. Esther and William finally stepped out. "This is enough," Esther whispered. "We have everything we need." William nodded. "But nobody will believe us without proof they can see with their own eyes." The next Sunday would be the church's biggest annual miracle service. Thousands of people were expected to attend. Pastor Daniel would once again perform miracles in front of everyone. Esther looked at William. "This is our only chance." Before sunrise on Sunday, Esther quietly handed every photo, video, and recording to the authorities. Then she walked into the church as if nothing had happened. The building was already full. The choir sang. The congregation danced. Pastor Daniel walked confidently onto the altar, smiling as the crowd cheered. He had no idea. His biggest secret was only minutes away from being exposed. Pastor Daniel stepped forward with a confident smile. "Today," he announced, "God will perform miracles that this church will never forget." The congregation erupted in applause. One by one, people walked to the altar for prayer. Then Pastor Daniel pointed toward Esther. "My daughter," he said. "The Lord is calling you." The entire church turned to look at her. Esther slowly walked toward the altar. Pastor Daniel placed his hand on her forehead. "Close your eyes," he whispered. Instead, Esther stepped backward. She looked directly at the congregation. "I didn't come here for a miracle," she said. "I came for the truth." The church fell silent. Pastor Daniel forced a smile. "My daughter, don't let the enemy use you." At that moment, William walked onto the altar carrying a laptop. Pastor Daniel's smile disappeared. William connected the laptop to the church's giant projector. Within seconds, the screen lit up. The first image appeared. Fake miracle certificates. Then, bank records. Hidden camera footage. Audio recordings of Pastor Daniel demanding money in exchange for fake prophecies. Video after video filled the giant screen. The congregation watched in complete silence. Some members began crying. Others stared at Pastor Daniel in disbelief. Then Grace slowly stood up from the back of the church. Her voice trembled. I told all of you. I wasn't crazy. I saw the darkness hiding behind him. Pastor Daniel looked around desperately. For the first time, no one applauded. No one defended him. He turned and tried to run toward the church office. Before he could reach the door, the authorities entered the church. They walked straight to the altar and placed him under arrest. As he was led away, the congregation stood in stunned silence. Some bowed their heads. Others wiped away tears. Esther picked up the Bible Pastor Daniel had dropped on the floor. She looked at the crowd and spoke softly. Never stop believing in God. But never stop questioning the people who claim to speak for him. The church remained silent as Pastor Daniel disappeared through the front doors. And from that day forward, the building that had once been filled with deception became a place where people finally learned that true faith should never be built on fear, manipulation, or blind trust.